All right, we're diving into something pretty wild today. I want you to forget everything you think you know about consciousness for a minute. What if it's not just something that happens inside your head? What if it's the actual energy that makes up the entire universe? Yeah, it's a big idea. Let's get into it. Okay, so let me just throw this out there right away, just to kind of shake things up. What if a rock is just as conscious as you are? I know, that sounds completely crazy, right? But the source material we're digging into today, it actually argues that on some fundamental level, it's true. So how on earth could that even be possible? So you can see right away we've got two totally different ways of looking at this. On one side, you have what most of us think of as consciousness. It's a brain thing, it's that little voice in your head, the one that says, I am, it's your awareness. But then on the other side, you have this completely different take. This view says, nope, that's not it. It's a global energy. It's the very fabric of reality itself, all flowing out from some kind of central source. All right, let's really unpack this radical new definition then. The idea that consciousness isn't a thought, but it's the very energy of existence. Okay, so here's the absolute core of it. The big takeaway is that consciousness isn't something our brains make. It's not a byproduct. Instead, it's this universal energy that's just flowing from a central source. And get this, it's not just sitting there. This energy is actively creating and holding together everything you see, every single thing. We're talking from the tiniest little atom all the way up to the biggest galaxy you can imagine. So if consciousness is an energy, you're probably wondering, okay, what does it do, right? Well, according to this source material, it's got two main jobs, and they're pretty important. This is how this whole universal energy thing actually works. Job number one is to create and sustain a being's physical form and its own personal awareness. And the really crucial part here is that the two are totally linked. You can't have one without the other. They're a package deal. Then there's job number two, enabling interaction with the world. And this is where it gets a little mind-bending. Because if everything is made of this energy, then every interaction you have, every conversation, every handshake, it's all just consciousness talking to itself. And that brings us to what is probably the most shocking part of this whole idea. Because if this energy is what supports every single physical form, well, then it means that everything has to be conscious in some way. There's this quote from the source that just hits you over the head with this concept. It says, get this, if you could somehow remove the energy of consciousness from an object, like a cupboard, it wouldn't just be an empty shell, it would literally dematerialize. Poof. Gone. So consciousness isn't in the cupboard. It's the very force field holding its atoms together. But okay, let's be real. How can a cupboard be conscious? It doesn't think, right? And this is where a new term comes into play, essential consciousness. This is the kind of consciousness we're talking about for objects, like that rock from the start. They don't have that I am feeling, that self-awareness we have. For them, being conscious just means their physical shape and what they do is being held together and run by this energy. It's almost like they're operating on a program, Now, this is super important. A rock's consciousness is not the same as yours, not even close. The source lays out a sort of ladder or hierarchy. At the very, very top, you've got the pure source. And from there, the energy kind of steps down. It flows through the soul, then to us humans, then down to animals, then material objects, and right at the bottom, you have elementary particles. So yeah, everything is conscious, but the flavor or the type of consciousness is totally different at each rung of the ladder. Okay, so that's the big picture. But what about us? How does this whole thing apply to you and me? Well, that brings us to the human puzzle. And in this model, it's a story of two selves, both running on the exact same energy. So the idea is that you're kind of split in two. You've got your earthly self, that's your personality, your day-to-day thoughts, the you that's listening to this right now, living life. But then there's also a higher self. Think of it as your spiritual core, a part of you that is always plugged directly into that universal source we've been talking about. And here's the kicker. The source says the number one challenge for us humans is that these two selves, they're not really talking to each other. There's this artificial barrier that separates your everyday mind from that deeper spiritual core. And the whole game, the whole point of our development, is to figure out how to break down that wall. So, what exactly are these barriers? And more importantly, how do we get rid of them? That's what we're going to get into right now, the path to a unified consciousness. Okay, so the source points to two big roadblocks,
First, there's that internal barrier we just talked about, the one separating our two selves. But then there's a second one, something called external emitters. The idea here is that there are negative energies out there in the world that can actually push down our consciousness and mess with that connection to our higher self.
So what's the solution? Well, it's actually found in the very energy we've been discussing. The claim is that if we can learn to cultivate and really activate that pure energy of consciousness, the stuff flowing from our higher self and the source, we can literally destroy these blockages. The text uses this powerful image of burning away all the negative stuff, dissolving not just the bad energy, but even the physical forms connected to it.
So there you have it. We've gone from a conscious rock all the way to our own divided self. And this whole wild idea is built on this one concept, universal energy. And it really just leaves us with one massive question to think about. What would it actually mean? What would it feel like to activate the full, unfiltered energy of your consciousness?